Welcome. We had a little bit of entertainment beforehand, get you thinking about Taiwan and writing about Taiwan. My name is Cherilyn Parsons, and I'm the founder and director of the Bay Area Book Festival. Thank you for coming. I was interested in this panel in particular, moderating, because I love to travel so much, and books were one of the ways that I began to explore the world when I was a little kid. I loved books that were set in foreign places, and often I then went to those places. And some of them had beautiful names, actually. Madagascar, Formosa, which of course is the old name of Taiwan, Kathmandu. So books really do inspire you to travel. And this panel is all about one particular place and writings from that place and of that place. So what I'd like to do is introduce each of the panelists and have them read a short passage, I'm talking just a couple of minutes, to give you a sense of their writing and a little taste of Taiwan to start out. So Ed, why don't we start with you? And Ed's book is, I forgot to tell everybody to turn off your cell phones, by the way, if you haven't already. Yeah, or at least the sound of the cell phones.
Have an amusing ringtone.
Unless you what?
Unless you have an amusing ringtone.
Yeah, amusing ringtones are okay. Yeah, that's right, exactly. So Ed is a mystery writer, and he wrote this book, Ghost Month, which is really fun. I read it. It gives you this, the whole mystery takes place during this famous month called Ghost Months, which maybe you can tell us about a little bit more, but it's just got this wonderful exotic flavor to it. And do you want to read a little bit, Ed?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming out Saturday morning and all. Well, wait a second. I have a feeling that quite a number of you already know a lot about Taiwan. Is this true? And I'm sure a lot of you already know what Ghost Month is, don't you?
There are no's.
There are some no's. Well, Ghost Month is basically the 7th lunar month. It's when there's a Taoist belief and a Buddhist belief that the doors to the underworld open and the spirits are free to walk the island. There are a number of things that you can't do or that are frowned upon during Ghost Month. You can't make big capital purchases. You can't buy a house because the spirits will think the house is for them. You can't buy a car because the spirits will possess the car. You can't whistle at night because otherwise spirits will follow you. You can't hang your clothes out to dry because then they'll become occupied by spectral people putting on your clothes. You should avoid water, and you should definitely not die during Ghost Month, because then your spirit will be lost amongst more angry spirits and stuff. Well, I'm going to be reading a section from the sequel to Ghost Month, which is coming out this fall. And the protagonist returns. His name is Jingnan, and actually that's my name. I gave him my name. I just made it really personal. So in this section, Jingnan is having a dream. I stood before an offering table that was adorned with burning incense, plates of fruit, and a bunch of other sacred objects I've never understood the purpose of. Smoke from the joss sticks obscured everything beyond the table, but I could feel that my old classmate, Guo, was near. When he was alive, I used to refer to him by his childhood nickname, Cookie Monster. Jingnan, he asked, is that really you? Yes, it is, I said. Where am I? You're standing at one of the doorways between the world of the living and the courts. What are the courts? I'm being judged and punished for all the wrong I've done in my life. He had made some mistakes in life. One of the last ones had been pointing a gun at me. Jingnan, the gods here are all mainlanders. And they're really loud and mean. I'm sorry you're having a hard time, Guo, but why are we talking? I have to apologize for trying to kill you. I'm very sorry. It's all right. You have to say that you forgive me, or it doesn't count. Okay, I forgive you. Thank you, Jingnan. Please allow me to apologize to you 9,999 more times. What? 10,000 times every day for the next 10,000 years. I'll be dead by then, Gua. That doesn't matter. All the dead are apologizing to each other as we try to work our way out of this maze. I forgive you to infinity, I said. Please consider this matter closed. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, next up is Joshua Samuel Brown, and he has this really fun book called Vignettes of Taiwan. He moved to Taiwan, how old were you?
I was young. I was 24.
24, and
I was
stayed...
very immature. I was very
and
immature.
stayed for how many
24.
years?
On and off for about 12 to 15 years.
Okay.
I lose count. I kept coming and going and
Yeah.
being called back.
And started, and was teaching English. And,
Teaching English
yeah,
illegally
yeah.
at schools, teaching children,
Right.
adults.
And so now writes like obsessively about Taiwan.
I write
He has for
obsessively
years.
about Taiwan.
Yeah, he does.
I've written
This is an obsessive person. Anyway, I will
slightly.
I will let you read.
Hi.
A section. Yeah. Thank you.
So first, I'd like to point out that the place that I'm writing about is the Cherilyn Night Market, which I wrote this story 10 years ago when it was still kind of cool. And now, if you're going to come with me to Taiwan, I'm going to take you to a much better night market than this, because it's kind of, as they say in Taiwan, lao diao ya. It's sort of corny. It's old hat now. There are much better places for me to take you. And the story is called Death by Cholesterol. Suicide in this primarily Buddhist nation is frowned upon. However, should the horrible futility of life be weighing ever heavier upon your soul, there exists one surefire way to ensure a painless, delicious demise. Death by cholesterol at the Cherilyn Night Market. As assisted suicide is illegal in Taiwan, I will couch my advice to you, my terminally depressed friend, in negative terms, advising readers inclined to continue living to stick to the lighter fare being peddled on the market's outer spokes: fried pastries, duck wings, squid on a stick, and other slow-killing delicacies, and not make their way to the enclosed food court that forms the Cherilyn Night Market's greasy innards. For starters, do not order, as an appetizer, 3 famous Taiwanese oyster pancakes, delicious fresh oysters folded into a pure egg batter and fried in lard. Following this, do not go to one of the chou tofu stalls and get yourself a few orders of deep-fried fermented tofu, served with a heaping helping of pickled vegetables and hot sauce. Finally, under no circumstances should you order a plate of Taiwanese beefsteak. This meal, which consists of a huge slab of grade D beef fried in lard on a hot plate, slathered in gravy and served with a side of greasy spaghetti and a raw egg cracked on top, will almost certainly kill you. Should Dame Fate decide that your ticket is not yet up and somehow give your tormented cardiovascular system the strength to pump out the pounds of grease which you, in your melancholic stupor, pumped in there, take this as a sign from the gods that your time is not as yet nigh. Under no circumstances should you attempt to finish the job by consuming half a dozen da ping bao xiao bing, big cake wrapped around little cake. The fried delight, a Cherilyn specialty, should be enough to help you pull the plug for good. If not, cheer up. There'll always be another night.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. A lot of food stuff written about Taiwan. We're going to talk more about that. I forgot to mention that Joshua has written a few Lonely Planet guides to Taiwan. So he is definitely one that you could ask questions about
And please,
traveling. Yeah, when he says he'll take you someplace, he really means it.
I may literally
Yeah.
take a few of you with me to
Yeah.
Taiwan after this
Yeah,
is
if
over,
you're
so.
interested, you know who to talk to. Okay, so Shawna Yang Ryan has this gorgeous book called Green Island, and it sweeps you through Taiwanese history in the 20th century, early 21st century, and it's also set partly in Berkeley. Main character lived in Taiwan and then came over here. And I just love this book. I listened to it part on audio, actually. It's a really beautiful audio recording. And then, of course, reading the book itself was gorgeous. So can you share a passage with us?
I wish I had something funny to read, but it's a little bit serious. So I wanted to read something that was a little bit descriptive of Taiwan. So this scene is later in the book, and unfortunately, the main character is quarantined in a hospital because of SARS with her father, and they're looking over the city. I washed his shirt in the bathroom, and when I came out, I found him at the window in his undershirt, his bare shoulder pressed to the glass. This short, thin old stranger, whose body my father, enigmatic, overwhelming, fearsome, somehow occupied. The compassion that I suddenly felt for him surprised me. I joined him at the window, trying to understand what he saw. Buildings, the haphazard jumble that betrayed the city's turbulent history, obscured the horizon. But I imagined I saw the curve of the earth, a smash of life gradually thinning out at the edges, sprinkled into the dark green hills, empty to the sea, an island shaped like a yam or perhaps a leaf of tobacco, with a black spine of dark mountains and knobby strings of twinkling lights cascading down the edges. I feel like I've been thinking about death my whole life, Baba said. I didn't know what to say. I thought your mother would live forever. She was always going to outlive me. His eyes, blue with age, sparkled in the sun's glare. I tried to think beyond my own meager personal memories to something more primal, a planet amid deep black space, still cooling from whatever blast or collision or universal hand that has created it. This planet is not just a lump of dumb rock. It is alive. It moves, shakes, slides. Two plates collide. 4 million years ago, two plates collide and an island erupts. This island. Our lives are so minuscule in comparison.
Thank you. So the last author speaking has written a gorgeous book called Letter from Taipei, and she's a poet, and she has illustrated this book with photographs that she took during a stay she had in Taipei, and it's really breathtaking. The lines of poetry and then the photographs really illuminate. They don't just depict what was in the poetry, but they give it another angle, take it further. I really enjoyed it, and so she is going to show some of read a bit and share some of the photos. So she'll give you a taste that way. Irene Shao.
Thank you. I'm just going to start at the beginning, and then Cherilyn is going to be like, stop. And I'm like, stop. And I actually can't read this small, so it's... Walking alone at night, new in a strange city, I have more in common with the billboards than the legs that tap broken and whole tiles, easily transitioning from dark to light and back again. What was this place so heavy with eaves? Were these temples or markets?
Can we get rid of the lights for a minute?
Where there were faces, there were no hands. Where there were hands, there were no faces.
Thank you.
I could only make friends with the fishes. Taipei is a city remarkable for its grays. 10,000 varieties in the mixing of soot and rain, against which its multifarious colors jostle for prominence. The brightest of these is the temple. I realized one could learn to find space in the thin lane smoke avoids. Which is not so dim a space as you might have thought. Though some roads are only imaginary, in the water or in air. and the obstructions are both straight and solid. Slowly, I began to notice that color could come very close to the gray. It could be a messy but exciting way to live, though by no means natural. Some days it seemed inevitable that I would always walk alone. That I should always stand aside and be an observer, looking for, but never meeting, the gaze of others. At times it seemed I was truly obsessed with the wrong things. Though doubtless there is a pleasure in being very, very wrong. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So there's a lot of places to write about, and they all have their different flavors, and there also are pitfalls in writing about certain places, cliches that go with them, and places also offer different inspirations. You think about, books set in India, there's sort of a feeling. There can be cliche, but there also can be inspiration that comes from that place. Scandinavia, we have a lot of Scandinavian writers here, and the cold and the chill and the crime fiction just comes out of there fabulously. So what is it about Taiwan that is a muse for each of you? And how about Shawna, would you mind starting?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I feel a personal connection to Taiwan because my mother is from Taiwan. But it is a place that I'm in love with. And Joshua, I liked what you said yesterday. You said you had a crush on Taiwan. And I feel like I have a crush on Taiwan too. It's just it's so lively. There's so much going on there all the time. The food has been mentioned. The cuisine is really amazing. And I think there's also this spirit of resilience that is really inspirational too, considering the history of martial law and the dictatorship, that people are still so optimistic. And, just the inauguration of their democratically elected female president just happened a week or so ago. Yay. So I think it's an amazing place for all those reasons.
And how did it influence your writing? I mean, if you were to write about a different place, is there anything that is about the place that sort of informed the writing process itself, or was it just more the story was there?
Oh, I think the challenge was trying to capture all the threads of Taiwan's history into one narrative. It's not a simple place. I mean, I guess there's no place that is simple, but it seemed particularly complicated, and drawing in all the histories of colonialism and all the competing powers that want control of Taiwan, and trying to negotiate that, I think was influenced the book because of having to negotiate all those different threads in a way that was didn't play into stereotypes about Taiwan, that represented it as its own place and distinguished it from the story of China as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had a dissident character and a family that was there, and then a woman who went to the U.S. So there's really a lot of ways that you were able to tell that story. Ed, you talk a lot about. I learned a lot about the Aborigines in Taiwan, which I didn't know that part, and all kinds of other threads in the place. Can you tell us about how Taiwan has been your muse?
Let's see. Well, I feel like, even though I was born in New York City, I feel like I've been living with Taiwan my whole life. My mother's family arrived in Taiwan as refugees from the Chinese Civil War. My father's family are native Taiwanese. They've been there since the Ming Dynasty collapsed in the 1600s. And, these are like pretty much the two main opposition groups in Taiwan, like mainlanders versus, Benshengren, the real native Taiwanese as they see themselves. But as you mentioned, Cherilyn, the indigenous people have the real claim to the island. And research, as the years progress, more and more research indicates that many of the Pacific Islanders, including many of the tribes now settled in the Philippines islands, all originated in Taiwan. So Taiwan was sort of the gestation for populating all these Pacific islands, which is one thing that distinguishes Taiwan. Let's see. So, as you know, as you may or may not know, Taiwan endured one of the longest martial law eras in modern civilization for 40 years, a little bit longer than 40 years. And so there was this whole sort of thing when I was younger and going to Chinese school, which is sort of like this almost propagandic vehicle to indoctrinate you into believing that one day we will recover the mainland, right? And these were actually very dangerous times in the 70s in the U.S. because the KMT, the Kuomintang, they had their secret agents infiltrated in all the Chinese and Taiwanese American communities. And they would report any dissidents, and your family back home would suffer the consequences, or you would be blacklisted and they would not be allowed to come to the U.S. So once, it's really funny, once martial law was lifted and the DPP was formally recognized as being a party that is legal to exist, my father was like, Taiwan must be free! Like, it was like this new identity that emerged from him that he'd been suppressing for so long. And so even my mother is like now aboard with this thing, which is remarkable because her father was pretty high up in the Kuomintang. This whole evolution that I've been with Taiwan has sort of infiltrated to my core in a way. I had a previous series that was set mysteries in Manhattan's Chinatown, and in doing the research for that, I couldn't help but think about why I was here, why my family was here, and it just led me on this whole path of research. One thing that's really great is that Columbia University has undertaken the task of translating a lot of contemporary Taiwanese literature, which is wonderful. In particular, I would single out Orphan of Asia by Wu Zhou. That's a great book. And as a matter of fact, I made my narrator an orphan, to sort of symbolize, Taiwan's status in not being a member of the United Nations. Even though it's sort of, the modern Taiwan is sort of like the product of three great cultures, China, Japan, and the U.S. And I sort of feel like there's so many stories all intersecting on this small island that could very well prove to be a flashpoint for conflict. And conflict's a great place to be writing from.
That's right. Really interesting place. Yeah. Okay, a place that engenders crushes. So, Joshua, you were the crushes person.
Hi there. And not only that, now I have a crush, but also now I'm a little bit jealous because maybe, you love Taiwan more than me, and, it's this weird thing. This is a common thing among expats who live in Taiwan. No, Taiwan loves me more. A very good friend of mine who Taiwan definitely loves, my friend Phelan, came up with a line that I am dutifully going to steal from him, which is, Taiwan is where people who had bad childhoods go for a do-over. And I came to Taiwan, and I'm not going to get too into it, but typical American divorced family upbringing, and I moved to Taiwan when I was, 24, not terribly mature. And immediately I found a family that took me in, and I was their, atoa stepson. I was their foreign stepson, and I called them Mama and Baba with my broken Chinese, and they would call me down to eat, and they would say, 这是鸡肉 chicken. Jiro, xie. And they taught me how to speak Chinese. And, they were kind of like this stable family that I lived with. And all of a sudden, within 3 or 4 months, I was living with this family and I had a purpose. Like I was teaching this person English, and this person, of course, never learned English, but that was okay because that was part of the reason that I was living there. And I was the guy in the neighborhood that people would come to ask, 嘉熙, 这个什么说? Oh, this is a book. 谢谢, thank you. And so I had this purpose there. Now, as a writer, I think Ed said it really well. He said that it's where these thousands of stories intersect. And I was thinking about this morning. I've experienced every emotion that you can possibly feel while living on Taiwan, except for one. I have never felt bored in Taiwan. And I mean, I literally, I've had nervous breakdowns on Taiwan that have, required slight intervention, nothing terrible, but, I wasn't bored during it. And this is why I get so many stories. I have another book of short stories that has a very long title, and the title is How Not to Avoid Jet Lag and Other Tales of Travel Madness. Anybody is going to write a book of short stories, go with less words. I'm just putting that right out there. It takes up your whole Twitter hashtag. But I have a story in that about Taiwan that is called Your Least Fun Hour. And it is about an hour that I spent waiting in a bank. Yet this experience still was weird enough and had enough just strangeness. I was literally just waiting in a bank, but I can send you the book if you want to read it. But it was so weird that I later went and I wrote a story about it. Every experience that I have in Taiwan has that element of, wow, this is something that's really unique, whether it's taking a taxi from point A to point B or running into a transvestite dressed up like the vice president in a former political prison. Like these things happen every day in Taiwan, and I don't know why. This doesn't happen to me in Portland, Oregon, which is where I currently live. I find life is a little bit dull there. And that's why Taiwan remains my muse, because it has never ceased to both entertain me, and it has never ceased to sort of use me as a channel for, hopefully, getting those stories out there.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Irene, I see you writing something. Can we interrupt you?
I'm always being interrupted when I'm doing something important.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So why Taiwan? How has Taiwan been your muse? How did you come to write this book?
Oh, well, both my parents...
Speak up. Yeah, thanks.
Both my parents grew up there, and I kind of wanted to know more about my family history, so I had this opportunity to go teach in Taiwan for a year. Well, actually, it could have been for longer if I'd wanted it to be longer, but and I thought, I will go and experience this place that I've never known. I think I was looking for a history, and this is so cliche. I was looking for a history and an identity that didn't exist for me. And much like I don't know what I was expecting to find. I just would pace the streets because I didn't know anybody. And it took me a very long time to realize that everything that was interesting that I could find was temporary, and everything that really is interesting to me about Taipei, which is where I was living, was sort of hidden away in a random alley. I used to pass this dump all the time because I also studied dance with Cloudgate there. And they were in this little village called Bali. And to get there, you had to, for a while, the way to get there was to cross through the dump. After a while, they closed that off. But it was my favorite thing because I would walk by, and every single day there would be something different there. And then it would be there, and then it would be gone. And that's sort of the essence of, well, for one thing, photography. If you don't take the picture when you see it, it's gone. I didn't have to walk far to have the sense that things were always changing and there were always things to be discovered there. Also, never mind, I'll tell you later.
Okay. Do tell us later. Thank you. Yeah, she's got to write something down. You can
No.
can go back to it. So we've talked about place, this place in particular, and the writer's toolbook, of course, includes place and character and voice, this sort of elusive, magical voice, and plot, story. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to what comes first for you. I mean, some writers, it is the place that is the inspiration. Sometimes it's a phrase that comes to mind. Sometimes it's a particular character, or it's based on someone that you think, oh, I want to write about this and kind of explore it further. So how should we go here? I guess, Ed, what the heck? We'll talk about you first? Okay, you're here. Yeah.
How do I start writing a story?
Yeah, of those elements, does anything resound for you in that?
Well, I know I have a relatively calm demeanor, but I'm a really vengeful person. And I come up with these, if I feel like I've been wronged, I come up with these ideas. How can I get this guy back? What can I do to take down this bank that dares to charge me this fee for bouncing a check? And then that kind of drives me a little bit. I mean, I'm not like pure vengeance, but it's like the initial sort of seed. I mean, it's very useful for mysteries. And I sort of feel like a mystery. There has to be a murder. There has to be there has to be a crime that there's no recall from. Like there just can't be like $23 million diamond heist. That's just money. There's no blood in it really. So that is my main driving point. I primarily do novels. I've always kind of seen short stories as being harder to work, but I became a father slightly more than 3 years ago, and I've been having these ideas for short stories that kind of lodge in my brain, and I have to write them out. Otherwise, I won't have the space to write the novels. So right now, I've got about 6 or 7 short stories, and I've been giving them boys' names, and I've been reading them and stuff. But at some point, maybe I would collect them or something. But a lot of writing is really kind of unconscious. Just kind of comes to you and just kind of grabs, like seizes me in the night. That's how it works for me.
And the new books are set. The stories are set. Where?
Oh, the short stories are set basically in the U.S. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The novels are in Taiwan.
Hi, how are you? So we're talking about places and settings.
Yeah, you write fiction.
I write fiction, and I write nonfiction, and I write travel stories. I'm sort of like a Johnny on the spot for writing. My best ideas inevitably come to me in the shower, which means that and the thing is, I sort of subscribe to this idea that the muse will come and it will plant this thing into your mind, and if you don't do something with it quickly, the idea will go to somebody else. So you have to do something. It's like you have to honor the muse. But okay, write this down, and it could be like, all right, just write 2 paragraphs down, and then you can put that in the this is the next story box. But you have to write that down. Obviously, if you don't jump on it pretty soon, it'll flit away. But for me, I write short stories. Probably about half the short stories I've written have been in Taiwan, but not all of them. I've lived in Belize, but I've only written 1 short story about Belize, and it wasn't very good. So I guess Belize doesn't have the same pull for me. With Taiwan, the thing that's coming to mind is there's a theory in permaculture that the most fertile places are where 2 different ecosystems meet, like where the forest ends and the grassland begins. That's like where you're going to have a very fertile area. And for me, Taiwan is where, and that's why I write about Taiwan, it's sort of where, I don't want to say it's where China ends and where something else begins, but it's this mixture. And because in so many different ways it's difficult to write about China for sometimes for political reasons, Taiwan can become a very good stand-in for China. And the novel that I'm now, in the final stages of finishing, it's basically about an American cult leader who goes missing, and it is presumed that he has been kidnapped by the Chinese government for nefarious reasons. But in fact, he's in a Taipei brothel because he ran up a bill that he couldn't pay. And it's a very tasteful brothel. It's more of a bathhouse, really, with a special area that you only go to if you're cool. And in any event, I couldn't do that. It gives me a way to sort of write about Chinese stuff, but I couldn't set that in China because it just wouldn't make any sense. And that's why, I feel like Taiwan's a really good place to write about Chinese stuff, but, with also the freedom that you're actually, not going to get a knock on your door for writing about that. Or at least I haven't gotten a knock on my door yet in Taiwan for writing about stuff. We'll see after this novel comes out how much they really love me. But in any event, hey, yo. Is that it? Is that enough?
Something? No?
All right.
So, Shawna, your book is so rich and just covers so much time. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the story, actually, kind of give us an overview, and how you came into it. I mean, you said that there was a personal history you were exploring, but even with the writing itself, there was so much research involved, creating these characters. Were they based on historical figures, or how did you develop it? It was such a mesmerizing book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So the story is set from 1947 to 2003, and it's narrated by this unnamed narrator who is born the night that this massacre begins, this famous massacre in Taiwan's history, the 228 massacre. And her father is arrested in the aftermath of that and is sent to Green Island, to the prison on Green Island for about a decade. And he comes back, and the family has to, integrate him back into the life, and he has to integrate back into regular life too. But in the meantime, there's this implication that he's still being spied on, and he's still being watched by the government, and they're living under martial law at that point. And it follows the narrator as she grows up and gets married and moves to the United States. And like Ed was saying, there were KMT agents in the U.S. who were also spying on Taiwanese Americans here. And so she and her husband are also being watched, and they get pulled into this kind of political plot. So, I mean, I think I started with the question, why? I mean, there was a point... I think there was a point when after I got through my adolescence, I looked at my mom and I was like, who is this person? And I think we probably all have that moment where we realize our parents are people, and then we want to figure out who they are and why they are the way they are. And I guess she seemed a little more distant to me because she had this just childhood that I didn't know about because she had grown up in Taiwan and I wasn't so familiar with it. So... and I'd spent my whole adolescence trying to be the most stereotypical American girl I could, obsessed with. I wanted to be a Judy Blume character. It's just fashioning my whole life around that. And then I just woke up and I was like, wow, who is my mother and what is our history? So I moved to Taiwan and discovered this history, and I was like, whoa, I can't believe that this whole life my mother had under martial law and this upbringing, and I had no idea about it, and she had never talked about it too. So I started doing research. I moved to Taiwan for a few years. I just loved looking through old books and watching old movies and just trying to pick out the details. I think the moment I discovered that taxi cabs were red, not yellow. And I'm like, that's an important detail. So just getting those putting those little pieces together. And then the Taiwanese Americans in the Bay Area were really amazing too. I interviewed a lot of people, and there's an organization run out of Berkeley, TaiwaneseAmerican.org, which is awesome. And the founder introduced me to a lot of the older generation who talked about their experiences being blacklisted and spied on in the Bay Area.
Yeah, she has an interesting dissident character who moves, who ends up in, should I say, would this give things away? Maybe
No
I shouldn't
spoilers.
say. What?
No spoilers. But the crazy
Spoilers.
thing,
Okay.
yeah.
Don't say that.
But the crazy thing about that character is he's based on a real person who lived in Daly City, who,
Okay.
which this is not a spoiler, this is a historical fact. It's not connected to my book at all, except based on this actual person who was murdered in Daly City by KMT agents on U.S. soil, who was an American citizen, which is insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So Irene, which comes first, the photo or the poetry?
Well, I mean, I just always keep a camera in my pocket. Everyone does this now because you all have phones that do this. I think actually back then people could have phones that did this too. But so as I walk around, I'm usually taking pictures as I'm moving. And sorry, what are you asking? Oh,
Yeah.
so,
Poetry. Yeah.
So I never planned to do, well, I planned to write a different book, right? I planned to write my family history, which I just made no progress on whatsoever. I don't know how I expected to just absorb it from the place. But instead, I just took all these notes with my camera. And I had an aunt there who was like, "Oh, you should print a book of your photos." And I was like, "No, I put them on Facebook. That's enough." But she took me to a printer. And for the first, so I had to make a little selection, and then he printed out little prints. And it was the first time I'd ever had hard copies of my photos, so I started sorting them because I've also been to Germany and they like to sort things there. And when I started sorting, I realized I had a story. So actually, the words I put it all together in 2 days.
Wow.
Because I wasn't thinking about the words at all. They were just so other people would see the same story that I was seeing. They're captions. Yeah.
Great. It reads like poetry, caption
Thank you.
poetry. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to turn to questions at this point anyway, so try to see. Okay, lady with her hand up, yes. Speak up, please.
Joshua, when you said that Taiwan was a good stand-in for China, I'm a Midwest girl, even though I love Asia. But I was thinking, would the Taiwanese people feel, I was like, whoa, this seems like a big statement to say here.
It's my Taiwanese friends. What do you think? I won't answer that question. 台湾人，你觉得那个台湾是不是一个好 stand in？ 可以就是代表中国的文化。What do you think? Did I say that wrong? Do you think yes or no?
So I think oftentimes people will say that Taiwan has sort of preserved traditional Chinese culture in a way that China has not because of the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, that 10 years where they went around destroying all of their culture. Oops.
After, the majority of people who lived in Taiwan, had come, their families arrived there long before.
Before 1949.
Long before 1949, in the 17th century, as I was saying. And so, in many ways, I think the situation of Taiwan is sort of analogous to the same sorts of colonial history of Taiwan. It was discovered, quote unquote, the same time as the New World was quote unquote discovered. And so we would never say that there's no such thing as American culture.
Right.
America is sort of a stand-in for this European history. But I also understand what you were getting at.
When I say as a stand-in, what I mean is, for example, if I were gonna film a shot that was supposed to be, Guangzhou in 1920. I could pick a neighborhood in Taipei that kind of looks like that, and everybody, well, this isn't right because they would be speaking Cantonese in Guangzhou. Let's say Shanghai in 1920 instead, and it would look around the same, and it would feel around the same, and you could get a similar feeling. So that's more or less what I mean. I didn't mean stand in as in exactly the same, because I think that there has been a great divergence. Did that answer your question? Partially?
Well, I was wondering, as an identity.
That's a big can of worms, And it's a big, big, big can of worms, and I'd be happy to talk after this about that, and I write about that. But yesterday, for example, I studied philosophy in school, so I can answer your question with a question, which is, well, what is American identity? See, and you can't
Make America great again.
No, let's. I've been trying to block that out of my brain.
Okay. Somebody said a couple days ago, let's get hats saying "Make America Berkeley" again.
Maybe.
Oh yeah.
But Taiwan identity is a huge mixture. It's a big potpourri of a lot of different things. But Chinese is still it's one of the more dominant ones. I don't think anybody would argue that. So and all the best art is there because they didn't, like I said, destroy all their art in 1966. All right, next.
Great. Next question.
I just wanted to put it out there that the new president that was just sworn in, her grandmother, so she's one quarter from the Aboriginal.
Bunan, I believe she is Bunan. Am I correct?
Taiwan?
Taiwan, yeah. So she represents, I think, a new dawn of a lot of new things.
She's also a cat lover.
Way in the corner. Back, yeah.
I could comment on the previous remark about Taiwan being a stand-in. I think it would work certainly for if you're a movie director, but I think it does a disservice to Taiwan to sort of only be seen as the cooler, more progressive, friendlier China, because if they are always to be seen in competition with each other, there will never be any progress, politically or socially or otherwise. And so Taiwan needs to escape that shadow of being the competitive government, which it once was. And that really is no longer the true reality of it. So that's just one opinion from a Taiwanese person.
Any comments from Ed or Shawna or Irene?
I think we have to think about what day it is today.
Right.
June 4th.
Exactly.
Something happened on June 4th a number of years ago. I mean, that was a huge departure point. And I think about the young people in Taiwan born after that date and looking at the response in Tiananmen and just thinking about how, that's so savage a civilization that they are not really a part of.
Irene, you going to say something?
Oh no, I just wanted to show off my anti-tank shirt. Which actually, this is an authentic one from my friend from Israel, who's a conscientious objector. But I was thinking about these small zones that China wants to claim, and how they've had to set themselves up as zones of resistance or zones of actually freer speech. And this is something I loved that comment by, I don't know you, but you were there about how Taiwan needs to sort of decathect from its history with China, but it can't, right? It's gone through these phases. It has Dutch beer, although that has nothing to do with its politics, right? But or maybe it does. I mean, isn't Formosa? Never mind. The more I talk, the more I'll reveal my appalling lack of historical knowledge.
One more thing to say.
Yeah.
It's one of my least, my most deeply unpopular opinions, but I keep saying it.
Are we going to have a fist fight?
Because I'll never learn.
Yes.
In some ways, just as when China absorbed Hong Kong, and then all of a sudden the financial system of Hong Kong actually kind of, for better or worse, took over China, pretty much effectively ended communism. I see in Taiwan as a Trojan horse, and when I see mainland people coming to Taiwan, because that's my main thing is tourism, and they're in Taiwan, I'm like, wait a minute, why is it that these people who look like us and they speak our language, why can they criticize their government and not get shot? Why is it that they're allowed to print all these things in their newspapers and we can't? Why do they have all these political parties and we don't? If we're all one people, well, why don't we deserve this? Because one of the main disservices that I think that the Chinese Communist Party does is that they say, well, Chinese people can't handle democracy. It will be luanqi bazao. It will be chaos if there's ever democracy in China. But then they can look in Taiwan and say, no, they have democracy. They are able to settle their disputes in a peaceful way. They were able to go from authoritarianism to a democracy without, heads getting chopped off. And I kind of think that in some ways, and if you're Taiwanese and you disagree, I'm okay with that. It might be partially a responsibility that Taiwan has to hold up a torch, if that makes any sense, and it may be a tough cross to bear, but I think it's happening right now. So there.
Irene, do you want to say something more? Or
Oh,
we should,
I just want, sorry.
then we should go to another question.
I just wanted to add that I find it most fascinating that the reason why people come is for the tourism. Like, they want to see the jade cabbage, or, you know, like, but it's the works of art that draw them, right? I mean, the jade cabbage is so boring. I know.
But I have heard the art is gorgeous. Don't see the jade cabbage. Okay, except for the
See
jade
the jade
cabbage.
cabbage.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
There is better. But
One
see the
writer
jade
says.
cabbage.
Okay, we had a couple arms up, so hands up. Right over you, the reddish hair. Yeah.
A lot of them do not exit their I live in Taiwan. They do not exit their hotel rooms. They're watching TV. They're watching precisely the political debates that they cannot get in China. And it's not an unpopular idea. This was part of Ma Ying-jeou's plan. Bring the Chinese over, let them see what we've accomplished, they take it back. So it was a very conscious decision. With the implementation of Tai Ying-wen, the Chinese government has reduced tourism by 1/3 because they're afraid of that.
Which tells us something.
Yes. So it's not just the art, it's definitely the politics.
Yes, question. Did someone back here have your hand up first? No? Not anymore? Okay. This gentleman here. Yeah.
I support TCP. I think it's one of the most evil organizations in the world. It must be, TCP must be dissolved as soon as possible.
Okay. Thanks for the comment. No pull with those people. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
First of all, I wanted to thank Shawna. That was a wonderful book. And I can't speak for everybody, but I was very grateful to find out about the history of Taiwan, which is not covered in American schools. You don't find out a thing. I did not know of the influx of and the taking over, the colonialism, the way that the culture and the people were grabbed and taken this way and that way, and from that, I would make one comment. Josh, you said that there were, they had democracy and no heads rolled, but in Shawna's book, I found out a lot of heads did roll on the way to democracy.
I apologize. That's not. I meant during that transition itself.
And about that, I guess,
was
right.
remarkably.
Shawna, do you want to comment on that? Do you have any? Yeah.
Well, thank you. No, thank you for your comment, and thank you for reading it. I mean, that's one of the things people say about Taiwan is this bloodless transition to democracy, which I believed for a long time too, but it depends how long you count the transition period, but I feel like it was a struggle, and it was very bloody, and I mean, they call the era the White Terror, and so many people disappeared, and so it was hard fought. It was, people paid for it. So it makes it more miraculous. I'm not trying to fight with you, though.
From the day that Chiang Kai-shek died to the end of martial law, that was.
I think because there wasn't like a 3-month coup or something like that, which is what people think of as bloody, right? And so it's easier to look away when it happens over 4 decades.
Gentleman over there, you, yeah.
I'd like to say one thing about Irene's book, which is that it was very different from the books that came out before it. It was a picture and a set of photographs of Taiwan that people didn't know, because it wasn't just the temples and the things that are beautiful in Taiwan. It was the culture of Taiwan. And the text of the book emphasized that. And not only was it unusual, but it was very widely received in Taiwan. I think it was number 2 on the bestseller list for weeks. In Taiwan, people wanted to see a book about their own country in a way that it hadn't been shown before.
Terrific. That's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, next, lots of questions. Yes, blue shirt. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment about Shawna's book, which I also really love. But I can't emphasize how important that book is and what an important story it tells. I also have a crush on Taiwan, and my first trip to Taiwan was, as Ed mentioned, there was a certain period in America where a lot of Chinese went to Chinese language classes on Saturday, and they were sort of propaganda classes. And I was very lucky. There was one summer where they offered free trips to Taiwan if you go study Chinese. And I was only 18, and I said, sure, brainwash me, whatever. And so I went to Taiwan, went to this Chinese camp for 4 weeks of brainwashing, and then I had 2 paid months to just wander the island. And that began my love affair with Taiwan. But during this period, it was in the 70s that I was there. So much of what Shawna talks about and writes about in her book was happening then. There were several murders that I was aware of, but you couldn't talk about this story. There was a story that one just could not talk about. And my parents told me, just don't go anywhere near that subject. And so I'm so glad that she told the story, and it's a wonderful story the way she tells it. But it's as important for Americans and what it says about American history and American politics at the time. Because even if they did not openly condone what was going on, I have to believe they knew and were aware of what was happening, and they didn't condemn. Please read the book. Yeah. And I will read the other books as well.
Yes, yes, and we're not closing quite yet, but since you're on that point, there will be a book signing, yay, and it's going to be at East Wind Books, which is on Alston Way.
It's on University.
No. The bookstore is on University, but they have a booth at the festival, and that's where they have books for sale. So I just wanted to make sure we get this right. Yes, East Wind Books on Alston Way. It's signing area number 1. And then next to that, it says Addison Street. That's why I pulled out my map, because I was like, wait a minute, where exactly is that? But that's where the books will be sold. Yeah, that does not make sense. I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. Okay, East Wind Books. That's where it's going to be. A couple more questions, though. Lots of questions all of a sudden. Gentleman back there, you had your hand up earlier, blue shirt. Yeah.
Irene, really beautiful photographs, beautiful text. I'm wondering, this was your first encounter, more or less, with Taiwan, as on your own? Is that something that will with an end, or are you going to continue working this genre?
Okay, so, well, I had been to Taiwan before because my grandparents were there, but it would always be a visit where I never left their apartment, basically. Or we would go for a stroll in the park across the street from their apartment and come back inside. They were very old. So it was the first time that I actually had any chance to really experience life there on my own, explore, walk. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, this person in the blue,
With the sleeveless, raising your...
Oh, yeah. Her hand's been up. Yes, go ahead.
I was really interested to hear that Irene's book was so popular in Taiwan, because I felt like I could also understand the things that you were reading to me. I was wondering how you write and generally for everyone, how you write for people who are really familiar with Taiwan and people who don't know about it at the same time.
Do you want me to? Well, I can speak first. That when I was writing the text, because I was teaching English at the time, I was thinking about using a language that would be comprehensible to my students. So that was also why I chose a fairly simple diction. And I think also, in a way, it expressed how I felt there, because I was forced to use a very simple diction of my own, because my Chinese is maybe 4-year-old, 5-year-old Chinese. So I was sort of reduced to the same level in my life that they were in my classroom. So I felt that in a way, that gave me a means of approaching that problem.
One last question. It's all we have time for. Oh gosh. Okay, the gentleman between the two of you. You want to negotiate that out? Okay. Okay.
A question for all the authors actually. So a lot has been going on in Taiwan. Alongside all the rich history, but recently we mentioned the new election of the president, but it's not about a couple of years ago. But to things like how being reported even more and more in mainstream media. Kavlan, the whiskey, but just the food culture, but all the other cultures. So how much of this is kind of like jumping out at you, and what new themes for Taiwan is like kind of starting, planting seeds in your respective muses for like future writing?
Anyone?
I finally, I would turn things into editors. It wouldn't matter what it was. It would be an article about Taiwan. And I always assumed that they just had on a cut, copy, paste thing, that one paragraph that they put in somewhere is Taiwan split from China after the Civil War of 1940, this thing that every, Reuters just uses that in any article. It doesn't matter if it's about Kavlan whiskey, and then they just put that at the end. I've noticed over the last maybe 3 to 5 years, they've stopped doing that, which... to me, that was always the mommy and daddy love each other very much, but they can't be together, this really simplification of things. So I think that people are starting to see Taiwan, and this sort of harkens back to somebody over there. It said this outside of the shadow of China and as its own entity that has its own to offer. And I think that this is going to... Kavlan whiskey, which you mentioned, I was just in the whiskey factory. I brought some people there because there was a little bit of a bike crash, and so we needed to do something with the group. Why not just drink? And... the fact they were like, oh yeah, okay, we'll drink with, and wait a second, this is as good as Scottish whiskey. Actually, it's better. It won the single malt, won an award over, didn't make very many friends in Scotland though, because they were a little bit jealous. But, all these things are coming out, and now people are starting to say, my goodness, these products coming from Taiwan are awesome, as a bicyclist, of course. So it's kind of coming out of the shadow for that in a lot of different ways. Did that answer a question? I'm going to give it to Shawna.
No, I agree. I feel like it's establishing its own identity outside of, and not connected with China, right? It's sort of like branding itself. And I think that's really important.
Anything else? Yeah, and then we got to close.
I just wanted to say that things really got started about 4 years ago with the emergence of Jeremy Lin, where this Taiwanese American, Chinese American, Taiwanese American identity was on the front page. It was incredible. But as things come out in recent years, there's also a kind of deepening in the history of what we can and uncover so far, because there are a lot of things during the White Terror era that are still not disclosed to the public, and why is this still so many years later being held by the government? It should all be released.
Well, thank you all for coming. Yeah, this was a great panel. Thank you.